Greetings of the day, this is Miss Tabassum. As you know that we have already started with Roald Dahl's The Landlady. Let's see the story so far. Billy Weaver reached Bath at about 9 o'clock in the evening. On asking, the porter suggested him to go to the Bell and Dragon. Billy started walking through the street. Suddenly he caught sight of a printed notice in which were written bed and breakfast. Billy thought to have a close look at it and thus moved closer. He saw bright fire was burning in the fireplace and the room was well furnished. So Billy thought that it would be a very comfortable place for him to stay. But before finally making up his mind, Billy thought that he would at least go and have a look at the Bell and Dragon. As he was turning to go, Billy felt that he was compelled and forced to stay over there. Without his own consciousness, he started moving towards the entrance door and rang the doorbell. Suddenly, the landlady, aged around 45 to 50, opened the door and welcomed him. Then the landlady took Billy to the third floor of the building and showed Billy his room. After unpacking his suitcase, Billy went downstairs to sign the guest book. As he was signing the guest book, he noticed that there were only two entries in the guest book. One was of Christopher Mulholland and the other was of Gregory W. Temple. When he saw these two names, he felt as if he had heard the former name, that is Christopher Mulholland's name, somewhere earlier. So he asked the landlady if those two names were of some famous personality. The landlady answered that they weren't very famous, but they were very handsome as Billy. Then the landlady offered Billy a cup of tea. As Billy was sipping the cup of tea, he felt a strange smell coming from there. He was unable to make out whether the smell was of pickled walnut or was from the corridor of a hospital or of a new leather. The landlady then asked Billy how old he was. Billy said that he was 17 years old. The landlady said Christopher Mulholland was also 17 years old, whereas Gregory W. Temple was 27 years old, but he looked too young than his age. Billy Weaver again said the landlady that he had heard the names before and he supposed that they had left recently. The landlady surprisingly remarked that Christopher Mulholland and Mr. Temple are still there in the fourth floor of the building. Now let's see the further story.
Here it goes. The Landlady by Roald Dahl. That parrot, Billy said at last. It had made me completely fooled. I could have sworn it was alive. It's most terribly clever the way it has been done. He continued, it doesn't look in the least bit dead. Who did it? The parrot, which was in the cage, seemed alive, but actually it was dead. Billy said that it was preserved so cleverly to look the dead as real. And he added that it looked so alive and also asked who had done it. I did. And have you met my little Basil? She nodded towards the dachshund. Billy looked at it and suddenly he realized that this animal had all the time been just as silent and motionless as the parrot. He put out a hand and touched it gently on the top of its back. The back was hard and cold, and when he pushed the hair to one side with his fingers, he could see the skin underneath, greyish black, dry, and perfectly preserved. The landlady's pet caught Billy's attention. He analyzes the animals then and asked if they were alive. The landlady asked Billy if he had met Basil, the dog. Billy then realized that the dog, which was in front of the fireplace, and the parrot, which was in the cage, were silent and motionless all the time since he arrived. Billy thus discovered to his horror that all of the landlady's pets were stuffed animals. Here, I would like to mention that the art of stuffing the skins of dead animals, birds and fish with a special material to keep them lifelike for display is called taxidermy. Preservatives are used to prevent the skin from rotting. "Good gracious me," he said. He stared with deep admiration at the little woman. "It must be most awfully difficult to do a thing like that." Billy was very astonished, as he could not believe that the landlady, who was so amicable, had been so cruel and stuffed the dead animals herself, as it was very difficult and unkind of her to do so. "Not in the least," she said. "I stuff all my little pets myself when they pass away. You did sign the book, didn't you?" The landlady said that it was not at all difficult to preserve those animals, and also added that she preserved the pets herself when they die. So, the landlady said that she was the only one behind the preservation of the dead animals. She then asked Billy if he had signed the guest book. "Oh, yes." Billy then affirmed that he had already signed the guest book. "That's good, because later on, if I happen to forget what you were called, then I can always come down here and look it up. I still do that almost every day with Mr. Mulholland and Mr. The landlady said it was good that Billy had already signed the guest book, as she could later on see the guest book and recall Billy's name after he is no more. She also added that every day she looked to the name of Mr. Mulholland and Mr. Temple in the guest book so that she remembers them. But due to her old age, she is unable to recall the name of Mr. Temple, and she could only speak about Mr. Mulholland. "Temple," Billy said. "Gregory Temple. Excuse my asking, but haven't there been any other guests here except them in the last 2 or 3 years?" Billy asked. The tea tasted faintly of bitter almonds, and he didn't much care for it. Holding her teacup high in one hand, inclining her head slightly to the left, she looked up at him out of the corners of her eyes and gave him another gentle smile. "No, my dear," she said, "only you." As the landlady was unable to recall Mr. Temple's name, Billy reminded her of it. Billy then found that his tea tasted faintly of bitter almonds. Billy finally starts to put 2 and 2 together and realizes too late that he is about to become the latest exhibit in the landlady's private museum of taxidermy. He then asked the landlady whether she had any other guests since the 2 young men. The landlady, with a gentle smile, replied that it was only Billy. The very last line, "No, my dear," she said, "only you," is an implication that the landlady has poisoned Billy's tea and intends to stuff his corpse as she has already done to Mulholland and Mr. Temple. Now, here we have word meanings. First, preserved, maintained, treated to prevent from decaying. Second, good gracious me. It is an idiomatic phrase used to express surprise. Third, admiration, a feeling of respect and liking for somebody or something. Fourth, awfully, terribly or extremely. Fifth, inclining, bending in a particular direction. Think and answer the questions. Number 1. When Billy Weaver rang the bell, the landlady said, "I knew you would come." Why do you think the landlady was expecting him? Answer. The landlady was expecting him as there was a printed poster with bed and breakfast against the glass, and from the outside Billy could see that the room had been done up in a pleasant manner and was looking like a comfortable place to stay. Second, why do you think the tea tasted of bitter almonds? Answer. The tea tasted like bitter almonds because it had been poisoned. Third, what do you think happened to the previous two guests? Answer. The two previous guests had been killed by the landlady and then stuffed. Fourth, what do you think would have happened to Billy Weaver in the end? Answer. Billy would be murdered and then stuffed by the landlady.
That's all for the day. Now we have come to the end of the story. Thank you. Have a great day.